With the prequel to The Purge coming out within the next couple months, I wanted to discuss horror movie prequels and what they bring to the table. There have been many horror prequels made, such as Alien Covenant, Prometheus, The Thing, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Beginning, Paranormal Activity 2 and 3, Cabin Fever Patient Zero. The list goes on and on. The 4 movies I'd like to discuss today include Insidious Chapter 3 and Insidious Chapter 4, The Last Key, Ouija, Origin of Evil, Final Destination 5, and Annabelle Creation. This is a spoiler alert because I will be discussing all of these movies in detail, so if you haven't seen them yet or you don't care, don't watch this. Starting with Insidious Chapter 3, which came out in June 2015, it continues the story of Elise before her death in the first Insidious. Elise goes to investigate the case of a young woman named Quinn that tried to contact her dead mother. Instead, Quinn summons something that is obviously not her mother. In this film, it shows how Specs and Tucker teamed up with Elise, which I always found to be an interesting story. I really like those characters. I feel like this prequel really does add to the overall story of Insidious, especially the main characters, Elise. Since she was killed off in the first, it makes sense to go back and dig into her story since it's interesting. At least I think so. A negative I have about the Insidious series is how she was killed off immediately, though I'm still a huge fan, and I think they were able to make up for her death by doing prequels. I believe that it would have been interesting to keep her alive, even if they did not keep her story going forward and instead died backwards like they are doing now. But, on the other hand, I can also see why they killed her off in order to set up for the sequel and to show the consequences and what could happen in the film's world. So it makes sense, but like I said, I have my own opinions about that. Next, going into Insidious: The Last Key, it was a sequel to Chapter 3 and the prequel to the first. It came out in January of this year. It dives even deeper into Elise's backstory and her childhood, specifically her childhood home and abusive father. Her past comes back to haunt her when a client calls for help, living at the same house she used to. It turns out the client in Elise's old home is holding a girl hostage in the basement, and they all find out once they go to investigate the haunting. He tries to kill them, they kill him. The plot was a little confusing in my opinion, but from there I understood it as there was something possessing the men in the house to kidnap and kill girls since her father also did this. I could be completely wrong. I'll have to give it a rewatch soon in order to figure it out. Let me know if you want a specific review about that, and I'll dive deeper into that if you do want a review. Compared to Chapter 3, this focuses even more on Elise and her family. It brings her estranged brother into the picture along with his daughters, which was a smart move. Introducing more characters such as the daughters and the one that has the same ability as Elise continues the possibility of having other films in the series about new characters. I like the idea of just having the possibilities open. I also like thinking of the Insidious series as 4 films, so if they were to create another one, I of course would go and support it, but I also like the idea of just having the 4 movies to complete it all. The Last Key directly leads up to the first one since it ends with Elise getting the call about Dalton and his family. I feel like this also adds to the overall story, especially since it makes Elise the main character. It adds development rather than takes it away. It also, as previously mentioned, adds to the future possibility of the series if they ever wanted to go into the one niece's paranormal ability. So next I'm going to dive into Ouija, Origin of Evil. It came out in October 2016 and is a prequel to Ouija. It is about a family that has psychic and paranormal readings done at their home, but they are scams and not real. In order to get more clients and save their foreclosing home, the mother decides to incorporate a Ouija board. Never a good idea, by the way. One of the children, Doris, tries to contact her dead father and instead gets possessed. She's possessed by a doctor from World War II that did experiments on people in the house's basement. This relates back to the original film since one of the original characters lives in Doris's old home. That's also how they found the Ouija board in the first one. This prequel was way better than the original, in my opinion. I watched Ouija a couple times. Maybe I'll revisit it one day soon, but I didn't enjoy it that much. This definitely added a layer to the series and made it better. I also like that this was an origin story because it gives more credibility to the first one. The storyline was interesting and brought something new to the table, specifically with the part about the World War II doctor haunting the home. Some could also see the plot as a negative because it kind of rehashes the story about a character living in a house of evil. Since the first involved a character living in a house that was originally Doris's, then the prequel is about characters that live in a house possessed by the doctor. Some may feel it gets kind of repetitive and boring. Second to last film I'm going to be talking about is Annabelle Creation, which came out last August in 2017. It is the prequel to Annabelle, and it is about the doll's origin. It explains how Annabelle, the child, was killed. To mourn the loss, her father made a doll in her honor. Eventually, the doll became possessed after they prayed to whatever was out there in order to see their daughter again. They believed it was their dead daughter's soul in the doll. After a horrific incident involving the mother, it was clear it was not the daughter. Years later, they decided to open their home to foster girls. It mainly focuses on two of the young girls, Janice and Linda. Linda also played Doris in Ouija Origin of Evil, so it was cool to see her in this one too. She's a really good child actor in my opinion. At the end, there is a flash forward in order to show how it is connected to the original. Janice, the girl who was possessed, joins a satanic cult and changes her name to Annabelle. She is the girl who murdered the neighbors in the beginning of the original. I like how it closely led right up to the original. It was an interesting story and a very well done film. I liked it better than the original. I felt like it did add to the original story. In comparison to Insidious Chapter 3 and 4 and Ouija Origin of Evil, it is interesting to see how there are a lot of similarities in the plots. All of them, besides Insidious 4, involve a character trying to contact a dead loved one, but instead welcomed evil into their lives. I think this is because they are paranormal horror movies, and it is an easy plot device to use, but it's still an interesting one, and they all used it in different ways. The last film is Final Destination 5, and it came out in August 2011. It is the prequel to the first Final Destination. It is about a group of friends who all work at the same company going on a bus trip. One of the characters has a premonition about the bridge collapsing and a lot of people dying. He makes everyone not go, and his premonition does come true. The friends start dying off in the order they died in the premonition. They try to figure out who is next on death's list. They figure that if they take someone else's life, they will be spared. One of the friends in the group accidentally does this and thinks he is safe. As they continue to die off, one of the characters threatens the remaining ones with a gun, going on about how his girlfriend shouldn't have died. The two remaining friends kill the character with the gun. The two remaining friends kill the character off with the gun, thinking they are also saved since he took over his friend's life. It ends with them boarding a flight to Paris, which it then became clear how this was a prequel to the first, which involves the plane crash. Instead of the characters making it off, they die during the flight. Their friend, who was in a bar at the time, also dies because it turns out the man who he accidentally and indirectly killed had a serious condition that was going to kill him at any moment. The plane crashed into the bar, also killing him. Something different about this film compared to the other films mentioned is that this is not completely paranormal related. It can still be considered paranormal with the whole idea about death, but there are no ghosts or demons like previous films. It was also not marketed as a prequel, so the ending was a huge surprise to viewers. I believe I'm thinking of this correctly, that it wasn't marketed as a prequel, which is really cool. It was a fun twist to a series that was getting stale. I would honestly love to see this series make one last and final comeback, even though the series kind of completed itself by looping back to the original. The Final Destination franchise brought a fun and interesting concept to horror. It was a little goofy, but it was also scary since it dealt with something that everyone has to deal with at some point in their life: death. There have been plenty of bad prequels and good prequels, but there is obviously no stopping them in the upcoming future. I believe filmmakers use prequels in order to go back and maybe dive into a character that they had killed off in one of the other movies, or just to, like, if there's a fan demand and they want to see the backstory of one character, they might go and make that for that purpose. So, what are some prequels to franchise that you would be interested in seeing? What are some ones you would not want to see at all? Leave your comments down below. I'd be really interested in hearing your opinions about some of your favorite prequels and some that may have not worked out to your liking, or some you would really like to see.